Hi, and welcome to Academic English. Today we are going to focus on CELBAN Speaking, in particular probing question 1, which comes before the role plays in the actual exam and right after the introductory questions. These are some typical probing questions 1. These are taken from the CELBAN Centre website. Describe an interesting trip, describe a pastime or hobby, describe a movie, TV or book, and he says you have approximately 1 minute to respond. Now, in the actual exam, it's important to notice that this probing question is when the examiners are actually starting to mark your speaking. In the introductory questions, when they ask you what is your name, what country are you from, how long have you been in Canada, those are questions in which the examiners are basically just trying to make you feel more at ease and comfortable in the interview setting. But as soon as you hear describe or tell me about, you know this is where your actual interview starts. So try to keep that in mind when you answer this question. Now, in terms of the organization of your response, and this is for all the probing questions, you first need to have an introduction. You can use the keywords in the question to give your introduction. Just one sentence, basically repeating the question. So if it says describe a trip that you took, you could say one trip that I took, which I really enjoyed, was when I went to Italy with my family. Just an example. After the introduction, you have the first main point, and then you need to develop that a little bit with some details or examples. And then you have a second main point, and again, you need to develop a little bit with details and examples. And finally, you have the conclusion. This is one of my most memorable trips. That's it. Just one simple sentence, letting the examiner know that your answer is finished. Now, in terms of how your response is evaluated, again, just like all the other probing questions, the examiners are looking for how you organize your response, how are you developing your answer. Also, it's important here to make sure that your answer is very easy to follow and that your main points are flowing naturally from one to another. And one way to do this is by using transition words. This also goes under the fluency and cohesion. Pronunciation, intonation, your pace. It's also important. Are you speaking too fast or are you making too many pauses? Grammar, using the correct verb is very important for this question because many times students, from my experience, they don't know which verb tense to use. So if they say describe a trip, this is something you did in the past, so use past tense. If you're talking about a hobby, for example, this is something you do habitually. Subject-verb agreement, they are also looking for that. Sentence structures, for vocabulary they are looking for, and also how accurately you use it in your response. A good way to boost your score for the probing questions is to use synonyms. If the question is asking you to talk about a trip, instead of just repeating that same word, trip, throughout your answer, try to think of synonyms. You can say first, I enjoy this trip because another reason why I liked this journey, right, or vacation. Now you may say, how do I prepare for speaking on my own, especially for the probing questions? It's important to just practice. Find questions, think about them. How would I answer these questions? And actually try to answer these questions. You could record your answers and listen to the recording when you're done. We are our own harshest critics, so I'm sure you can give yourself some very good feedback already. But in terms of grammar, I understand it's a little bit difficult. You could get a friend who's a native speaker or who is slightly higher level in English and ask them for feedback, or you could get your teacher to give you feedback as well. It's important to practice from the very beginning to give the answer in an organized way. Introduction, 2 main points, develop, and conclusion. If you learn from the beginning the right way to do it, it's going to become very natural. So you don't have to stop and think, oh, what's next? Did I do the introduction? It's going to be very easy for you to do it because you practiced with this format and it's going to come naturally to you. Work on the grammar issues that you notice that they're recurrent for you in your speech. So if it's verb tenses, try to practice with a grammar book and work on those verb tenses. If it's subject-verb agreement, if it's prepositions and so on. Try to work on that particular aspect of your grammar. Grammar in CELBAN, it's actually worth double the points. If you make grammar mistakes, you lose a lot more points than if you have problems with fluency or vocabulary, for example. And as always, practice makes perfect. So practice, practice, practice. Really, that's for everything, but it's very important for speaking, because speaking is not something that you can learn and memorize. It's something that becomes better the more you practice it. Same with reading. So now, saying that, let's practice. In question 1, it says describe an interesting trip. So now think of an actual trip that you took. Once you thought of an actual trip, now think of some reasons why you found this trip interesting. Was it the weather? Was it the geography of the place that you went to? The people, the culture, the activities that you did, the food, and so on. From all these reasons, you could choose 2 of them to focus and develop with details and examples. And then practice giving your answer. You could also think of the 5 W's. Who did you take this trip with? When did you go on this trip? Why was this trip special? What did you do on this trip? Where was this trip? And then you will choose 2 of these that it's easy to develop your answer on, and then start giving your answer. This is one sample answer for this question. So first we have the introduction. It says, one interesting journey that I took was when my partner and I went to Iceland together. Now that the introduction is done, first main point is on geography. The main reason why this trip was exciting was because Iceland has such a unique landscape. We rented a car and traveled to different sites during the 5 days we were there. The entire country is breathtaking. It's very easy for the examiner to tell that I started talking about the first main point because I said the main reason. Then you move on to the second main point. Another aspect that made this trip fascinating was the fact that almost the entire country, other than Reykjavik, is virtually uninhabited. We felt like we had the entire country all to ourselves. And then the conclusion. I think from all the journeys that I took so far, Iceland has to be my most favorite one. So now it's your turn. Take some time to think about these. Choose 2 of those points and now give your answer. You have 1 minute. Try to record yourself. Let's go to question 2. Describe a hobby or a pastime. So first, it's important to decide what you're going to focus on. Are you going to focus on a pastime activity or a hobby? Sometimes, depending on the hobby or the pastime, it can be both. So let's focus on a pastime. What is the activity? When do you usually perform this activity? Where do you do it? Or where do you go for this activity? Who do you perform this activity with? And why do you like this activity? And again, you will choose 2 of those to discuss and develop. Now, give your answer. Good. You can listen to it and see how you did. If it's not very good, you can do it again. Next question is describe a movie, a TV show, or book. Again, choose one. You don't need to talk about all of them. So let's say we're talking about a book. What is the book? The title. When did you find this book? Where is the setting of this book? Why do you enjoy this book? Who are the main characters? So now think of two of these and then practice giving your answer for 1 minute. Remember to follow the organization and use transition. Good. These are some common mistakes that I notice that my students tend to make when answering this question, which causes them to lose some points. The very first one is not organizing your response and not using linking words or phrases. But I've noticed a lot of my students, depending on the country you're from, they could go on and on speaking on the topic, but it's not very obvious what are the main points. They don't go into details explaining the main points or giving examples. Now, from some other countries, some of the problems that they face is that they don't really know how to develop the answer and they just say one simple sentence. One trip that I really enjoyed was when I went to Japan with my family. But the examiner cannot really examine your response and give you points for it because you didn't really speak. Giving a lot of reasons but without really giving details or examples is also one aspect that causes you to lose points. Now, using the wrong verb tenses, this is a big one for this question because sometimes it's very difficult for the students to know what verb tense to use. So listen to the question and try to use the appropriate verb tense for that setting. So if it says describe a trip, it's obviously something that already happened. Use past tense. If it says describe a hobby, it's something you do habitually. Use present continuous. If the question is asking you to talk about your reasons for becoming a nurse, when you first became a nurse, what were your reasons? You're talking again about past. Always listen carefully to the question in order to know what verb tense to use. Now, some students also lose points because they misunderstand what the question is asking for. For example, this question in particular, that is one of the CELBAN questions, is describe your reasons for becoming a nurse. Many students start talking about why they like to be a nurse, but they don't talk about what first encouraged them or motivated them to become a nurse. So not why you like to be a nurse now, but why did you become a nurse when you first became a nurse. Does it make sense? And of course, if you speak too fast, you lose points. If you have too many pauses, you lose points. Try to have a normal pace. Practice again can help a lot with this.
Tell me about an interesting trip that you took recently. Where did you go? And what was so memorable about this trip?
One interesting trip that I took recently was going to Spain with my family. We traveled to Marbella. One of the main reasons why this was such a memorable trip was because it was a trip of firsts for my children. Seeing their little excited faces when they went for the first time in an airplane or when they started speaking another language or experiencing different food, a different scenery than Belgium for sure. Just seeing their faces made me really happy. Another reason why I really enjoyed this trip was because Costa del Sol has such beautiful scenery. On the one side, you have the beautiful villages up in the hills or the mountains, and on the other side, you have the view of the sea, which is just beautiful. These were just a few reasons why Spain was such a memorable trip.
Tell me about your favorite pastime or hobby. What is it? And why do you enjoy it?
My absolute favorite pastime activity is hiking. When I lived in Vancouver, I used to hike every single weekend. Now I get to hike when I travel. The reason why I enjoy hiking so much is because I enjoy being outdoors in nature and discovering different places, seeing places from a higher altitude, which usually has a greater view. Another reason why I enjoy hiking is because typically the trails are not very busy, unless it's a popular trail like Grouse Mountain. The trails are very quiet. It really allows for meditation and connecting with nature and just taking in the scenery. These are just a couple of reasons why I enjoy hiking.
Tell me about a favorite movie, TV show, or book. Why do you like it so much? Would you recommend it to others?
I usually enjoy reading historical books or books that are based on true events. One of the most impactful books that I've read is a book called Left to Tell. This is a book about the Rwandan genocide in which a lot of the Tutsi people were targeted and killed, told from the eyes of a survivor. This book had an impact on me because even though the events of the book are gruesome, it shows the other side of human nature and how people can be very compassionate, putting their own lives at risk in order to help save other people's lives. Another reason why I found this book very impactful was because it's told from a survivor's perspective who wasn't really aware of what was going on outside of their hiding place. They could only hear what transpired from the eyes of the person that was hiding them and trying to protect them. And once they were freed and the conflict ended, they understood the full extent of what actually happened in their country and how much more gruesome it was. I will definitely recommend this book to anyone who is interested in learning about historical events from a different perspective. Thank you for being here. I hope you found this video helpful and I hope you got some good practice out of it. Next, I will talk about the probing questions that come at the end of the exam, which is the opinion question and the problem solution question. So I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.